This tutorial is going to give you some starting points for the average test scores program. So I just changed our hello world to average test scores. And since the directions told us to enter values as integers, I'm going to enter a score as an integer. And I'm not assigning it any values yet, but I could actually, let me go back for a minute. I'm going to enter a counting variable. I'm going to start it counting at 1. And then it says that we need to enter a number of test scores or a number of values, so I'm going to use a while loop in order to do that. So while my counting variable is less than or equal to my target value, I think it is 3 in this case, we are going to do the following. And basically what I'm going to do here is create a loop to get the user's input for however many users inputs we have. And I'm not going to do exactly what you need to do, but I'm going to model something very similar. So we need to get basically 3 values in, and we were told that they were going to be integer values. So I'm going to say int num. When you do yours, you would probably use a descriptive variable for whatever it is you're inputting. And so I want to, and the reason that I declared that as an integer is because they said they wanted us to enter test scores. So num's not as descriptive as what I would like. I would use score. And then we want to read in from the console. So I can do console.readLine. And readLine is going to read in a value from the keyboard. And then that's going to be our command. But the problem is, that reads something in from the keyboard, but it doesn't assign it to a value. So if I try to then assign that to the value score, I get all kinds of errors. And it says here, string reads the next line of characters from the standard input. So I'm taking in a string, and it cannot implicitly convert the type string to int, if you look down here. So what that's saying is it cannot convert a string to an integer. So then we have to try to convert it. Well, we could go back and try our integer .try parse on this in order to convert it to an integer. But we've got a few things that we need to look at here. First of all, integer.try parse would work, except it's throwing another error, and it says there's no overloaded method try parse that takes 1 argument. Remember, try parse was our error trapping command, and if we're going to, and this is actually the best one to use because it's going to check to see if we have an integer, but this whole expression returns a Boolean, so this is a good time to talk about error trapping. What we really want to do is to make sure our users don't enter bad data. So if try parse works, and then the extra arguments, remember that error says no overloaded method takes 1 argument. I have to have a string, and then I have to have my output. And so it's kind of telling me, giving me a hint right here what I should create my output to be. So if I do comma, and then I'm going to put my output is going to be to score. So I'm going to take my output and I'm going to put it into the score variable here when this is executed. It is throwing an error. If that is true, then we can I would say accumulate the scores, because that's what we're going to need to do. If it's not true, then you guys need to throw an error message. Now on the error message for this one, you can't use message box because we're not in that GUI anymore. We're in the console, so we just have to do a console.writeLine and just say something like invalid data. And so if we run this program, it should allow us to enter scores. I do need to double check a few things on my loop. So remember, all loops have 3 parts. We have our initialization, we have our guard, and then I'm missing my update. So after I check to see if the data is okay, I'm going to do invalid data, then I'm going to have to do a count ++. And that will add, count ++. That will add 1 to count. However, I might want to take this counting variable and place it inside my loop here because, or the if decision here, because if it's invalid data, I don't actually want to count that I entered a score because that was invalid data. So this loop will run until I enter 3 integer variables theoretically. So if we start it and see if it executes, average test scores 3, 5, 7, 6, and then it quit. I know it was a 6, not a 7. Then if we go back, so a couple of things. Number one, I didn't have a prompt, meaning whenever you code this, you should probably tell them what you want them to enter. So I should have given them a prompt here. And if you start to use your IntelliSense, if you highlight that and press enter, it'll fill it in. And I'll just say enter a test score, for example. Then when we run the code, it's going to give us a nice prompt, and we will enter 3 test scores, and then it will continue on. So enter a test score 4, 4, 4, and then it's that last pause is outside of this loop. It's waiting for you to hit enter to quit executing. It goes back to that when we first ran the example with the debug, where it's waiting for the key. Remember, we have this read key, so that last pause is on this read key. If you want to make sure that you know where you're at on that, you can also put in just another prompt right here where you could have it just say something, enter key to exit. And so that gives you an idea to know where you're at. And if you want to put an extra space, you can use your escape sequencers, or should be able to use your escape sequences in here to get a little space on the screen. So enter my test scores 5, 5, 5, enter any key to exit, and yada, yada, yada. Okay, so that just showed you the outline of a loop. It doesn't show you the whole project. I will give you some hints here that you're going to have to accumulate the scores within here. And then outside of that while loop down here, you will need to compute the average of the scores. Okay? And then you're going to use that project. You will change the while loops to, I believe, a 4, and then you'll change it to a do while before you are done.